Bible in a Year Live, Chronological Project, Week 22, Day 2, The Message. Eventually the brook dried up because of the drought. Then God spoke to him, "Get up and go to Zarephath in Sidon and live there. I've instructed a woman who lives there, a widow, to feed you." So he got up and went to Zarephath. As he came to the entrance of the village, he met a woman, a widow, gathering firewood. He asked her, "Please, would you bring me a little water in a jug? I need a drink." As she went to get it, he called out, "And while you are at it, would you bring me something to eat?" She said, "I swear, as surely as your God lives, I don't have so much as a biscuit. I have a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a bottle. You found me scratching together just enough firewood to make a last meal for my son and me. After we eat it, we'll die." Elijah said to her, "Don't worry about a thing. Go ahead and do what you said. But first, make a small biscuit for me and bring it back here. Then go ahead and make a meal from what's left for you and your son. This is the word of the God of Israel. The jar of flour will not run out and the bottle of oil will not become empty before God sends rain on the land and ends this drought." And she went right off and did just as Elijah asked. And it turned out as he said, daily food for her and her family. The jar of meal didn't run out and the bottle of oil didn't become empty. God's promise fulfilled to the letter, exactly as Elijah had delivered it. Later on, the woman's son became sick. The sickness took a turn for the worse, and then he stopped breathing. The woman said to Elijah, "Why did you ever show up here in the first place? A holy man barging in, exposing my sins, and killing my son." Elijah said, "Hand me your son." He then took him from her bosom, carried him up to the loft where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he prayed, "O God, my God, why have you brought this terrible thing on this widow who has opened her home to me? Why have you killed her son?" 3 times he stretched himself out full length on the boy, praying with all his might, "God, my God, put breath back into this boy's body." God listened to Elijah's prayer and put breath back into his body. He was alive. Elijah picked the boy up, carried him downstairs from the loft, and gave him to his mother. "Here's your son," said Elijah, "alive." The woman said to Elijah, "I see it all now. You are a holy man. When you speak, God speaks. A true word." A long time passed. Then God's word came to Elijah. The drought was now in its 3rd year. The message: "Go and present yourself to Ahab. I'm about to make it rain on the country." Elijah set out to present himself to Ahab. The drought in Samaria at the time was most severe. Ahab called for Obadiah, who was in charge of the palace. Obadiah feared God. He was very devout. Earlier, when Jezebel had tried to kill off all the prophets of God, Obadiah had hidden away 100 of them in 2 caves, 50 in a cave, and then supplied them with food and water. Ahab ordered Obadiah, "Go through the country, locate every spring and every stream. Let's see if we can find enough grass to keep our horses and mules from dying." So they divided the country between them for the search. Ahab went one way, Obadiah the other. Obadiah went his way, and suddenly there he was, Elijah. Obadiah fell on his knees, bowing in reverence, and exclaimed, "Is it really you, my master Elijah?" "Yes," said Elijah, "the real me." "Now go and tell your boss I have seen Elijah." Obadiah said, "But what have I done to deserve this? Ahab will kill me. As surely as your God lives, there isn't a country or kingdom where my master hasn't sent out search parties looking for you. And if they said, 'We can't find him, we've looked high and low,' he would make that country or kingdom swear that you were not to be found. And now you're telling me, 'Go and tell your master Elijah's found'? The minute I leave you, the Spirit of God will whisk you away to who knows where. Then when I report to Ahab, you'll have disappeared and Ahab will kill me. And I have served God devoutly since I was a boy. Hasn't anyone told you what I did when Jezebel was out to kill the prophets of God? How I risked my life by hiding 100 of them, 50 to a cave, and made sure they got food and water? And now you're telling me to draw attention to myself by announcing to my master Elijah's been found? Why? He'll kill me for sure. Elijah said, As surely as the God of the angel armies lives, and before whom I take my stand, I'll meet with your master face to face this very day. So Obadiah went straight to Ahab and told him, and Ahab went out to meet Elijah. The moment Ahab saw Elijah, he said, So it's you, old troublemaker. It's not I who has caused trouble in Israel, said Elijah, but you and your government. You've dumped God's ways and commands and run off after the local gods, the BIAYLs. Here's what I want you to do. Assemble everyone in Israel at Mount Carmel and make sure that the special pets of Jezebel, the 450 prophets of the local gods, the BIAYLs, and the 400 prophets of the whore goddess Asherah are there. So Ahab summoned everyone in Israel, particularly the prophets, to Mount Carmel. Elijah challenged the people, How long are you going to sit on the fence? If God is the real God, follow him. If it's Baal, follow him. Make up your minds. Nobody said a word. Nobody made a move. Then Elijah said, I am the only prophet of God left in Israel, and there are 450 prophets of Baal. Let the Baal prophets bring up 2 oxen. Let them pick one, butcher it, and lay it out on an altar on firewood, but don't ignite it. I'll take the other ox, cut it up, and lay it on the wood, but neither will I light the fire. Then you will pray to your gods, and I'll pray to God. The God who answers the fire will prove to be, in fact, God. All the people agreed. A good plan. Do it. Elijah told the Baal prophets, Choose your ox and prepare it. You go first. You're the majority. Then pray to your God, but don't light the fire. So they took the ox he had given them, prepared it for the altar, then prayed to Baal. They prayed all morning long. O Baal, answer us. But nothing happened, not so much as a whisper of breeze. Desperate, they jumped and stomped on the altar they had made. By noon, Elijah had started making fun of them, taunting, Call a little louder. He's a god, after all. Maybe he's off meditating somewhere or other, or maybe he's gotten involved in a project, or maybe he's on vacation. You don't suppose he's overslept, do you, and needs to be waked up? They prayed louder and louder, cutting themselves with swords and knives, a ritual common to them, until they were covered with blood. This went on until well past noon. They used every religious trick and strategy they knew to make something happen on the altar, but nothing happened, not so much as a whisper, not a flicker of response. Then Elijah told the people, Enough of that. It's my turn. Gather around, and they gathered. He then put the altar back together, for by now it was in ruins. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes of Jacob, the same Jacob to whom God had said, From now on your name is Israel. He built the stones into the altar in honor of God. Then Elijah dug a fairly wide trench around the altar. He laid firewood on the altar, cut up the ox, put it on the wood, and said, Fill 4 buckets with water and drench both the ox and the firewood. Then he said, Do it again, and they did it. Then he said, Do it a 3rd time, and they did it a 3rd time. The altar was drenched, and the trench was filled with water. When it was time for the sacrifice to be offered, Elijah the prophet came up and prayed, O God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, make it known right now that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant, and that I am doing what I am doing under your orders. Answer me, God. O answer me and reveal to this people that you are God, the true God, and that you are giving these people another chance to repentance. Immediately, the fire of God fell and burnt up the offering, the wood, the stones, the dirt, and even the water in the trench. All the people saw it happen and fell on their faces in awed worship, exclaiming, God is the true God. God is the true God. Elijah told them, grab the Baal prophets. Don't let one get away." They grabbed them. Elijah had them taken down to the brook Kishon, and they massacred the lot. Elijah said to Ahab, "Up on your feet, eat and drink, celebrate, rain is on the way, I hear it coming." Ahab did it, got up and ate and drank. Meanwhile, Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bowed deeply in prayer, his face between his knees. Then he said to his young servant, "On your feet now, look toward the sea." He went, looked, and reported back, "I don't see a thing." "Keep looking," said Elijah, "7 times if necessary." And sure enough, the 7th time he said, "Oh yes, a cloud, but very small, no bigger than someone's hand, rising out of the sea." "Quickly then, on your way. Tell Ahab, saddle up and get down from the mountain before the rain stops you." Things happened fast. The sky grew black with wind-driven clouds, and then a huge cloudburst of rain, with Ahab hightailing it in his chariot for Jezreel. And God strengthened Elijah mightily. Pulling up his robe and tying it around his waist, Elijah ran in front of Ahab's chariot until they reached Jezreel. Revenge from Jezebel. Ahab reported to Jezebel everything that Elijah had done, including the massacre of the prophets. Jezebel immediately sent a messenger to Elijah with her threat, "The gods will get you for this, and I'll get even with you. By this time tomorrow, you'll be as dead as any one of those prophets." When Elijah saw how things were, he ran for dear life to Beersheba, far in the south of Judah. He left his young servant there and then went on into the desert another day's journey. He came to a lone broom bush and collapsed in its shade, wanting in the worst way to be done with it all, to just die. "Enough of this, God. Take my life. I'm ready to join my ancestors in the grave." Exhausted, he fell asleep under the lone broom bush. Suddenly, an angel shook him awake and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and to his surprise, right by his head were a loaf of bread baked on some coals and a jug of water. He ate the meal and went back to sleep. The angel of God came back, shook him awake again, and said, "Get up and eat some more. You've got a long journey ahead of you." He got up, ate and drank his fill, and set out. Nourished by that meal, he walked 40 days and nights all the way to the mountain of God, to Horeb. When he got there, he crawled into a cave and went to sleep. Then the word of God came to him, "So Elijah, what are you doing here?" "I've been working my heart out for the God of the angel armies," said Elijah. "The people of Israel have abandoned your covenant, destroyed the places of worship, and murdered your prophets. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me." Then he was told, "Go, stand on the mountain and at attention before God. God will pass by." A hurricane wind ripped through the mountains and shattered the rocks before God, but God wasn't to be found in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but God wasn't in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, fire, but God wasn't in the fire. And after the fire, a gentle and quiet whisper. When Elijah heard the quiet voice, he muffled his face with his great cloak, went to the mouth of the cave, and stood there. A quiet voice asked, "So Elijah, now tell me, what are you doing here?" Elijah said it again, "I've been working my heart out for God, the God of the angel armies. Because the people of Israel have abandoned your covenant, destroyed your places of worship, and murdered your prophets, I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me." God said, "Go back the way you came through the desert to Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, make him king over Aram. Then anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, make him king over Israel. Finally, anoint Elijah, son of Shaphat, from Abel Meholah, to succeed you as prophet. Anyone who escapes death by Hazael will be killed by Jehu, and anyone who escapes death by Jehu will be killed by Elisha. Meanwhile, I am preserving for myself 7,000 souls, the knees that haven't bowed to the god Baal, the mouths that haven't kissed his image." Elijah went straight out and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, in a field where there were 12 pairs of yoked oxen at work plowing. Elisha was in charge of the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak over him. Elisha deserted the oxen, ran after Elijah, and said, "Please, let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, then I will follow you." "Go ahead," said Elijah, "but mind you, don't forget what I have done just now to you." So Elisha left. He took his yoke of oxen and butchered them. He made a fire with the plow and tackle and then boiled meat, a true farewell meal for the family. Then he left and followed Elijah, becoming his right-hand man. At about this time, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mustered his troops. He recruited in addition 32 local sheiks, all outfitted with horses and chariots. He set out in force and surrounded Samaria, ready to make war. He sent an envoy into the city to set his terms before Ahab, king of Israel. "Ben-Hadad lays claim to your silver and gold and to the pick of your wives and sons." The king of Israel accepted the terms. "As you say, distinguished Lord, I and everything I have is yours." But then the envoy returned a second time, saying, "On second thought, I want it all, your silver and your gold and all your wives and sons. Hand them over, the whole works. I'll give you 24 hours. Then my servants will arrive to search your palace and the houses of your officials and loot them. Anything that strikes their fancy they'll take." The king of Israel called a meeting of all his tribal elders. He said, "Look at this, outrageous. He's just looking for trouble. He means to clean me out, demanding all my women and children, and after I already agreed to pay him off handsomely." The elders, backed by the people, said, "Don't cave in to him. Don't give an inch." So he sent an envoy to Ben-Hadad. "Tell my distinguished lord, I agreed to the terms you delivered the first time, but this I can't do. This I won't do." The envoy went back and delivered the answer. Ben-Hadad shot back his response, "May the gods do their worst to me, and then worse again, if there'll be anything left of Samaria but rubble." The king of Israel countered, "Think about it. It's easier to start a fight than end one." It happened that when Ben-Hadad heard this retort, he was into some heavy drinking, boozing it up with the sheiks in their field shelters. Drunkenly, he ordered his henchmen, "Go after them," and they attacked the city. Just then a lone prophet approached Ahab, king of Israel, and said, "God's word, have you taken a good look at this mob? Well, look again. I'm turning it over to you this very day, and you'll know beyond the shadow of a doubt that I am God." Ahab said, "Really? And who is going to make this happen?" God said, "The young commandos of the regional chiefs." "And who," said Ahab, "will strike the first blow?" God said, "You." Ahab looked over the commandos of the regional chiefs. He counted 232. Then he assessed the available troops, 7,000. At noon they set out after Ben-Hadad, who with his allies, the 32 sheiks, was busy at serious drinking in the field shelters. The commandos of the regional chiefs made up the vanguard. A report was brought to Ben-Hadad. "Men are on their way from Samaria," he said. "If they've come in peace, take them alive as hostages. If they've come to fight, the same, take them alive as hostages." The commandos poured out of the city with the full army behind them. They hit hard in the hand-to-hand combat. The Arameans scattered from the field, with Israel hard on their heels. But Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, got away on horseback, along with his cavalry. The king of Israel cut down both horses and chariots, an enormous defeat for Aram. Sometime later, the prophet came to the king of Israel and said, "On the alert now, build up your army, assess your capabilities, and see what has to be done. Before the year is out, the king of Aram will be back in force."